There's a lot of things about food and foodie culture that are very easy, to make fun of. My name is Emily Flake. I'm a cartoonist, illustrator, and writer in New York City. I cartoon primarily for The New Yorker. Any group that I'm a part of, I feel like is fair game. I do a fair amount of jokes about, jokes about moms and jokes about the kind of person who goes to farmers markets and, has this self-satisfaction that is important to address when you're making jokes. We've lost so much of food's place in our culture as that's been replaced by a mechanized version of it or a corporate version of it. It doesn't have as much to do with our history and our hearts anymore. I think that the movement towards understanding where our food comes from and what our food is really speaks to that loss. People get very invested in the story of their food because we no longer have the story of ourselves. The food of the early 80s was a woeful, woeful thing. It's such a sea change from when I was a kid, and we're having conversations about it in a way that I feel we were not having in the 70s or 80s, say. Although in the 70s and 80s, my conversations about food were like, I will only eat the Cheerios and the banana. I also think that things move and change so quickly that, more things are thrown at you more quickly than they would have been 30, 40 years ago. So I feel like the life of a food trend is much shorter these days. I imagine that fondue was popular for more than 2 months. I feel like it had a few years in there where that was a thing. But now I feel like, everybody loves truffles, nobody loves truffles. Or, everybody loves bacon for a second, and then, or matcha powder. Nice things that people get very excited about for a few minutes and then forget about. I think it's such a churn at this point. I fear that because of that, people will decide they're sick of trying to eat responsibly or support small farms, and that again is a danger of that kind of churn. And I hope that that's not the future of things. But if people feel too just burnt out on something, then they're going to stop paying attention, and I think that's too bad. Because of the sort of self-satisfaction inherent in being the kind of person and I am this kind of person because I do shop at farmers markets and I try to buy, meat that went to college and the whole 9 yards. So there's a self-congratulatoriness that needs to be taken down a peg or two. Food transparency, food responsibility, it's a thing that is it's personally important to me, and it's a thing that's easy to make fun of. And I'm glad I live in a world now that I am able to be aware of where our food comes from and what our food is. This was not, I feel like, an available thing when I was a kid. I feel like you either grew up on a farm or, you just got the meat from the meat store. But the fact that these choices are increasingly available is, I think, a net good. And I think that the rising popularity of this kind of thing hopefully is a net good for small farmers and small businesses and, people with a real connection to the thing that they're making.